All right, so today we're going to talk about collisions and the difference between a collider and a trigger and how they interact with each other in Unity. So go ahead and just create a 3D object, doesn't matter what shape. I'm going to create a cube and I'm going to create another one, and that's going to be a sphere. All right, just going to move these over here. And also to give it some color, I created a material, so I'm just going to drag that onto those just so it gives it some color. All right, now if you click on one of them, you'll notice it has a mesh render and a box collider. So this is the type of collider that's on it. And there's an option that says is trigger. I'm going to select is trigger to true, but I'm actually going to keep this one not on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this component that I've already created called pickup. Now if you want to create a script, just right click, go to create, go to scripting, and select mono behavior script. And make sure that you rename it to something like pickup. We're going to double click it. And essentially, this is how it behaves. So this is inheriting from mono behavior. I called it YSA pickup, but you can call it pickup. And essentially, uh, in a similar way from the other scripts that we have, that have like the void start and the void update functions. We still have those, but we don't need them, so I deleted them. And what I'm doing right now is I'm using two functions called, or methods called on collision enter and one that's on trigger enter. So at the beginning I mentioned there's two different things. There's colliders and then there's triggers. So colliders essentially behave in a way just like in the real world. Imagine some object that has physics when you interact or collide with it. A trigger, on the other hand, won't have any physical influence on anything. So essentially, what happens is you can go through it. You can go directly through these triggers as if they're not even there, but they still give us data and event um, related to what's passed through them. So that's going to be very valuable, and you'll see in a moment. So remember, I created one trigger. This is a trigger, and this one is a collider because it's not set to is trigger. And I have this script that basically says if this object that we went through this trigger with, if we went through it and it says it's a pickup, then essentially what I want to do is just deactivate this. And we basically repeat the same thing here, except now it's for any triggers. So if we detect that the thing that we pass through is called a pickup, then we do the same thing. We just deactivate it. All right. So what is this pickup thing that we're talking about? What is this tag? Well, if you come into Unity, you'll notice that the sphere and the cube currently say untagged. So what we want to do is we want to tag it as a pickup. I have this one that's capital pickup like this. If you don't have it, you can just go to add tag and then just click the plus and then create the new tag, call it pickup or whatever you want, save it. All right, once you've done that, make sure to set it to a pickup object. And I'm going to do the same thing with the sphere. It's a pickup. And just be aware that the spelling here must match exactly the same as the spelling here. So if you changed it, make sure to update this code. All right. So now that we have that set up, inside of the player, we created this pickup zone. So I'm going to go ahead and recreate this pickup zone so you know how. So in the player, I'm going to create a cube object like that. And we're going to scale it. So I'm going to scale this thing. Just click that. I'm going to scale it like that. That seems about good enough. All right. And now that it's covering our player, we don't want that. So we're just going to turn off the mesh renderer. So even though the mesh renderer is off, it's still physically present in our world. I'm also going to rename it pickup zone. So that way we know what that is. And now we can attach this pickup script to that. And so now, oh, we also need to set this to is trigger. Again, to remind you, the reason it's a trigger is because if I didn't set this to trigger, then in the real world, what would happen is that this box would behave like a real box and the collisions wouldn't look real. So we set it to is trigger so that things can pass through it, but we can still collect data and events. All right. So to recap, we have our pickup script attached to this pickup zone inside of our player. And what is the pickup script going to do? Well, it's going to look for anything that is a type of collider or a type of collider set to is trigger. And when it enters into our player's pickup zone, then we should see something happen. So let me play it again. All right, I'm going to go over it and you'll notice it disappeared. I'm going to go over this one and that disappeared too. So even though I deactivated it, we can get the same, we basically have the concept of picking something up. So that's just to demonstrate. When it comes to actually picking things up, equipping them, positioning them in our hand, that's a whole nother story. But essentially, this is how collisions and triggers, colliders work together.